Aaran Dobson directs and co-writes Raw File, a British found footage movie. Now, what is the story of Raw File? It follows two investigators, one of which, called Monica, seems to be a somewhat covert investigator for some type of organisation, and she has a kind of cameraman that doesn't really know what's kind of going on. He's just paid to be there, really. And they are investigating a suspicious suicide where someone threw themselves off this kind of apartment building. So they go to this building and they meet Chris, who works as a kind of concierge in this particular building, which appears to be mainly kind of student housing. And now the three of them are having a look at potentially what has gone on, interviewing people, having a look at the person's apartment and things like this. And as the movie goes on, we learn that there may well be satanic shenanigans that have been going on, and this building may be ground zero for some type of big time devil worship. Let me just kind of say that. So that is what I will say on the plot. Let's discuss what I think works in this movie's favour. So this was apparently a very, very low budget movie, as a lot of found footage movies tend to be fair. But I will say I think this has an air of originality about it. The movie, I think, is quite an interesting sort of premise. It doesn't really tell you what's actually kind of going on until kind of late into the movie. You will pick up bits through the film, but they're not like, you know, going there with the intention that there is going to be something paranormal. They're going there with the intention, well, certainly our cameraman, whose character name is Aaran, doesn't really, he's just there filming. Monica may well be a bit more suspicious about what's going on, but, you know, we as the audience think it's just some type of suicide. But, you know, obviously as the film goes on, you know, the stakes raise, and there's some interesting and, you know, quite sort of in-depth sort of paranormal events and sort of satanic trappings and things like this. So it's quite a sort of somewhat unique found footage movie in some ways. I will say I thought some of the characters here were very strong. In particular, the character of Chris, who is this employee that works for this apartment building. I thought his acting was very naturalistic, and I thought we had a great kind of chemistry with the character of Aaran, who is the cameraman, who you never actually see, but the character of Aaran is actually quite a major part of the story. And a lot of the times the cameraman in these sort of found footage movies tends to be sort of silent, and the kind of the on-screen kind of characters tend to do most of the talking. Here though, Aaran is always kind of engaging, and he comes across as, you know, out of his depth, but a good chemistry with Chris, and they do seem like two people who have just kind of stumbled into this kind of world of the paranormal and seem, you know, completely no idea about what it is they're doing and what it is they're supposed to, how they're supposed to, you know, react to things. And I thought their performances were very strong, I have to say. As the film goes on, I think that the pace of the movie is relatively strong, and, you know, that it seems to be, you know, more things are revealed, and there is some kind of great use of clever cuts in this movie. For example, they seem to get trapped on like the 6th floor, and no matter what sort of floor they go on, it's always the 6th floor, and it looks like it's being constantly filmed. There's some sort of clever edits and stuff which the filmmakers have used here to kind of like fool us as the audience to that kind of thing. So there's some pretty significant supernatural things that happen on screen, and once we get past the kind of the halfway mark of the film, you do see some sort of more overt things happening on screen. I I will say, as a little side note, I think it's somewhat to its detriment, but this is not a film where we didn't see anything. You do see things. You see quite a lot of things once you get kind of past that halfway mark. And again, you might not necessarily know what you're seeing, but you do see certainly some supernatural stuff, and I think some of it is handled, fairly well. And what does sell it, though, as I say, is the acting from the majority of the cast here. So it was a fairly sort of interesting plot, and for a found footage movie that reportedly has a very, very small budget, it's well put together. Now, what you may not know, looking at the IMDb page of this, there's a lot of research that went into this movie. So I will commend the filmmakers here for really sort of going a step above beyond to like look at, for example, there's various texts that we see, and it's kind of like an Enochian and angelic script and things like that, and they try to do the effort to make it like, authentic style language and stuff like this, which I thought was, didn't have to do that. Things like this, and there's some sort of clues here that give you a better understanding about what's going on, particularly if you speak other languages. It's not necessarily too much overt, but again, it looks like the filmmakers have thought about this project and taken the time to create an interesting world that's been kind of quite well thought of. I say quite well thought of because I do think there are some stuff and some quite obvious things that have bypassed these filmmakers to make some dumb things. Now, as much as this kind of like high level of research has gone into the kind of the supernatural stuff, some of the more terrestrial stuff seems to have passed these filmmakers by. So let's talk about what doesn't work. I do think this movie ends up being a little silly. Let me give you some examples. So at one point we have Chris and Aaran get separated from the character of Monica, and Monica knows what's going on. We'll talk about her in a minute, but Chris and Aaran don't. But at a point they see some bad stuff and they want to get out. They try to call the police, but they can't call the police. And that's their attempt at looking at outside help. They're in an apartment building. There's lots of fire points and kind of like alarms that they could be pulled. That never comes up. We even walk past some. If you were trying to call the police and you couldn't get through, you could always pull a fire alarm. You could always go into a room and use the internet if you can't use a phone. I mean, it might not work, but it's never addressed. So there's some kind of obvious things like this that are just sort of overlooked. A lot of attention has been given to the paranormal stuff, but some of the terrestrial stuff, again, if you're thinking this is with the found footage conceit, it's the idea here is that you are meant to believe these are, this is a realistic thing you're looking at, and that's a suspension of disbelief. But there seems to be elements here that don't really seem to kind of reflect that. Now, I think when we start to see the kind of the supernatural stuff on screen, there should have been more panic, at least from the characters of Aaran and Chris, who at this point have no concept that there's something supernatural going on. I will say towards the end of the movie, they kind of, especially kind of Aaran, he does sort of panic a little bit more, but when the stuff is happening initially, there should have been more fear and panic, which there really isn't. We have a scene where the character of Monica is carrying a gun, and she shoots someone with it. And then she gives it to the character of Chris, who readily takes it. Now, if you're this character of Chris, you don't really know what's going on at this point, but you've just seen this Monica shoot someone, and then she hands you the gun, and you take it. Well, there's no like, oh, now it's got my fingerprints on it and things like this. We don't know that this person that was shot is some type of supernatural entity. It looks like it's just murder. But yeah, we'll definitely pick up this gun, and it's never even addressed. It's never even addressed. So again, some of these sort of like, they spent a lot of time like researching the supernatural stuff, but some of the kind of the more down to earth stuff seems to have kind of like missed the mark a little bit. So let's talk about this character of Monica. she is the character out of our trio who knows what's going on. Now, it isn't really clear when we watch the movie about who she is. If you are willing to read the notes on IMDb, you'll learn that what she's from, and that's great. But the movie shouldn't make you do homework to have to understand it. And again, we'll look at it as a thing that's really sort of overlooked. She comes in as an investigator, and this Chris character just lets her in and to interview potential witnesses and go into people's apartments. She has no, this Chris never asks her for any ID, who she's working for, what's it about. He knows that she's not from the police. But again, there's no sort of check. Now, if you're an employee, and this Chris is an employee of this building, it's not his building. He's told he's worked there for 3 years, but it's an older building, so he's employed by someone. You wouldn't just let in someone who wants to get, sensitive information without any credentials. I mean, I work for a company, and if someone come and ask me to do an investigation and do this, I certainly wouldn't just let them have carte blanche about whatever they want. But that's what's kind of happens here. Again, it's another example of, I think, that the more mundane stuff just kind of really isn't thought about. Great, we've got a lot of kind of research on the supernatural stuff, but it's the mundane stuff here that makes this movie look a little silly and dumb at times. Now, the next thing I'll say, I appreciate this as a budgetary issue. But they do use these kind of Adobe After Effects to try and give our supernatural characters or elements a spooky effect where it looks like this black smoke's coming off them. It looks, like Adobe After Effects. I appreciate this is a low budget movie and limited availability about what you can do, but sometimes less is more. If you can't make it look particularly good, sometimes it might not be worth having these effects because they don't look particularly kind of realistic. In actual fact, it looks comical at sometimes because it looks like people are farting, but you have these kind of fart clouds that are coming out. And they use it quite a lot. I mean, I get you might want to use it sometimes to sort of show that someone's sort of supernatural, but it's an effect that I think is overdone. And again, I understand the budget. This channel is all about those low budget movies, so I do understand, but I think by using what you have, sometimes restraint is a little better, and you don't need to constantly kind of have like these puffs of smoke coming off these people to sort of tell us that they're sort of supernatural and not these there's a few other things that happen. And again, there may be other ways to have done it without the kind of the more obvious sort of CGI effects. The last 10 minutes of this movie I think is absolutely unnecessary. It doesn't really add anything to the movie. The movie kind of ends 10 minutes before, and we get a kind of extended sequence which really ends the same way as it did sort of 10 minutes ago. Sort of necessary, if you ask me. So, I think this movie is an enjoyable watch. It's to be commended for having this kind of original idea, and our kind of performances I think are quite engaging. I think the character of Monica, her character needed a little bit more context. I didn't think the acting was quite as strong for her, if I'm honest. Overall, it's a pretty good movie. It's not. I've seen a lot of positive buzz. I know Aaran from Screenstars really liked this one. It's a 6 out of 10. It's a kind of mildly above average movie in the low budget fan footage pantheon of movies, but I didn't think it was particularly groundbreaking, if I'm honest. And I think it missed some tricks here to make this more of a believable movie, to be honest. So 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What were your thoughts? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.